Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rebecca. I'm a licensed therapist and I specialize in complex trauma and relational trauma, attachment trauma. In my previous video, I went through episode 3 of Adolescence to go through beat by beat why, as a trauma therapist, I think the way they depicted his responses was perfect for how someone with Jaime's trauma would respond. If you haven't watched that video, go take a look at it. However, I got a lot of comments of people saying that I either missed the mark, that it's not about his parents, it's about the online culture, or saying that a lot of people have the trauma that Jaime does, so why do I think that he has this trauma? And these are all great questions. And so what I'm going to do in this video is go through what we know about Jaime and how we know that there is trauma. There is relational trauma. And I'm going to go through it in a few different sectors. So we're going to look at his trauma with his parents, the trauma with his school and peers, and then the online bullying as well, and how that would impact a young boy. And the reason I'm doing this is because when we can understand why Jaime responded the way he did. Now, again, we are not excusing the behavior, but we can understand how he became vulnerable to that kind of behavior, to that kind of influence. We can protect our boys because boys deserve better. And if Jaime had had more love and connection in his life and more emotional support and more genuine friendship and felt like there was someone to talk to when he was getting bullied, he would have still found the online content, but he wouldn't have been as vulnerable to it. In fact, he probably would have been like, this is weird. I don't like this. But instead, he probably felt really validated by it or curious by it because there was no one to talk to and he was in a lot of pain. And these people understood his pain. And when we can go through and understand the type of love and support that boys need in childhood, we help protect them from becoming vulnerable like Jaime. But we don't just protect them from being vulnerable, but we protect them from the amount of pain that Jaime was in. We help them build resilience to know that they're lovable, to have greater access to their hearts, to love, to be respectful. And so it protects them. It gives them a better quality of life. And then it also protects everyone around them because we know that men can become violent. And then when men are hurting, sorry for the cut here, it cut me off as I was recording. So what I was saying is that when we protect boys and we give them love and they get to grow up knowing that they're loved and connected to their hearts and connected to respect and wanting to give that back, not only does that better their lives, but it betters everyone's life around them because we know that when men, oftentimes, not always, but when men are really hurt, they are susceptible to growing up to be susceptible to this online toxic masculinity culture, and then they hurt others, especially women. So this is protective of everybody by understanding what do boys need to be emotionally healthy. So I'm going to go through a few different things that happen to Jaime through what we know, and we only have 4 hours. I'm going off of 4 hours, so some of this is a hypothesis. But gonna go through what I am taking away from these 4 hours of Jaime's life. And then at the end, I'm going to name specific things that boys need to be healthy, specific things that would have protected Jaime from becoming susceptible to this online culture and potentially to the peer pressure of his friends. We actually don't know that the decision to kill his classmate was Jaime's decision. And that's something I'm going to go into further. It was his decision, but that it was his idea. There potentially could have been some peer pressure. All right, and I'm going to name as well that there is season 2 of Adolescence is coming. They're going to be sharing more information, so I'm so curious to see if that new season is going to line up with what I'm sharing with you here, and I will be making a video, I'm sure, as that comes out, which will probably be in a year or two. However, I'm going to move forward with what we do know because we are given information about the ways that Jaime was not treated well, did not have the love and support that he needed, and how he was left vulnerable to that toxic masculinity and manosphere culture. The first thing I want to name before going into his history is a little bit of information about relational trauma and its impact. So, Gabor Mate, who is a well-known expert in childhood trauma, has quoted, and it's well known in the trauma community, that the trauma is not what happened to you, it is the impact that's left behind. It's the psychological and emotional wound. And so by default, when I looked at episode 3, from everything I know about trauma, and we know that when there's relational trauma, connection remains our deepest desire because it's everyone's deepest desire. It's where we find meaning in life. But it also becomes so scary because there's such a deep history of rejection and pain in that rejection. That connection becomes linked with rejection and we don't know if it's safe. So connection becomes our greatest desire and our greatest fear. And we see that happening in episode 3 in how Jaime's responding to Brienne. We see him want like her and want to feel connected to her, feeling scared, not trusting, then leaning in, getting really vulnerable, probably the most vulnerable he's ever been, and then feeling exposed, misunderstanding something she says as rejection, and that is on fire for him because there's a wound. We see the wound activate, and then he feels like love's not available, and he moves into power and rage. So we watch that happen. So this is the evidence. This is the emotional, psychological wound that we're watching in Jaime. So even though we don't have all the facts, we have some things, and I'm going to share what those are. But even though we don't have all of them, we have enough that we have not enough facts. We have the visual. We have the visual of the wound to know that something has happened, that Jaime has been through a lot of heartbreak and wounding when it comes to relationships, that he is so easily triggered and untrusting and vulnerable to that dynamic with Brienne. So that's important to name. The second thing about trauma that's important to name is that trauma is not just what happened to you, but it's the lack of support when the hard thing was happening. So, because people go through different things, and going through hard things with support is what creates resilience. Going through hard things is not bad. We don't want to avoid hard things, hard challenges. But a child who is getting bullied at school, let's say they have a lot of support. So this child goes to school, they get bullied by a bunch of peers, they come home, they go to their parents, like, I had a horrible day. This thing happened and this thing happened, and they start crying. And their parents are able to sit with them and hug them and say, I'm so sorry that happened. And then talk with them. What does this mean to you? What do you think might have been happening for that other kid? And naming that it's okay that not everyone likes you. How they're treating you isn't okay. But they don't get to decide how you feel about you. You get to decide how you feel about you. And really having that support to work through that emotional resilience to bullying is huge. And I know many people who were bullied who had great support, and they are some of the most resilient people that I know. They have the most self-confidence and are just lovely people to be around because they have self-trust, they have self-connection, they know their worth, they're not basing their worth on how the other person treats them. And that comes from some of these really negative experiences. So the negative experiences in themselves are not the problem. The problem, they're not great, right? Nobody wants their child to be bullied. But the real problem was the complete lack of support that Jaime had. So I'm going to go through that and name a little bit of this. So let's start with his anger and his parents. There's a lot we don't know about his parents. A few things that we do know. One, his dad has an issue with rage and then seems to be relationally avoidant. So we know that Jaime witnessed his dad experience rage a lot. We don't know if it ever came out onto him or not specifically, but he would have watched it come out onto his mom. And as a child, that would be really scary. He would feel both like connected to his dad. I love my dad, so mom must have done something wrong, but also I love my mom. And it's very confusing for kids to witness that between their parents. And through this, rage got normalized. There's also through this implicitly for children that I don't know that I am safe here. That's just going to kind of create an internal collapse. Even though that anger is not coming directly towards the child's going to sense it in the environment, and it's going to feel scary and not like a safe, nurturing environment. It's just in the air. His mom in episode 4 names that Jaime had a lot of anger when he was younger and that she didn't get him the help that he probably needed. This is a big statement. So Jaime, we don't know why Jaime was so angry when he was little. And there's a few possibilities, so I'm going to name some of them here. One of them could have just been his temperament that he was born with, that he was more prone to anger. That could be a part of this, and I don't want to ignore that. The second is that it's normal for kids to get angry. Everyone experiences anger. Anger is a protest when we have primary anger, and that protest is, I don't like what's going on. And for kids, there can be some sort of violation. There can also be disappointment. I want a cookie after dinner. We're not having cookies. The kid gets super angry, right? And it is the job of the parents to help that child understand, I know you're angry. I know this is disappointing, or in a disappointment situation. If there's a violation, to help the child be like, I hear you're angry, and then hold boundaries. It's okay to feel angry. We all get angry. It's not okay to hit. It's not okay to scream. It's not okay to hurt anyone else. It's not okay to throw things. We hold the boundary of what's okay, but I'm here for you. You're not alone. And to give them some tools to move that anger. And then to teach them and stay curious. What do you think your anger is communicating to you right now? Because anger communicates that something's happening to me that's not okay, or to someone else that's not okay. And we want to honor that. We want to teach kids to know how to make contact with that. Now, that's primary anger. Sometimes kids also will act out in anger when they don't get what they want. That's more frustration and disappointment. We also want to be with kids when they're feeling frustrated and disappointed. We want them to know that we're not scared of this in them, and we're going to help them through it. I know this is so frustrating. It's hard not to get what you like. It's hard not to get what you want. I feel that. It's so disappointing. And we're not going to be able to do this time. It helps the kid know, I'm frustrated. These feelings are overwhelming. They don't scare my parents. I'm still loved. They're helping me through it. And it's going to help me the next time I feel this overwhelm to be able to handle it a little bit better in myself. It's something we call co-regulation. So children are born without any way to soothe themselves. Babies just cry, right? The way that we learn to soothe ourselves is by being soothed. And so when a parent can stay calm and help their child through the frustration, through the disappointment, which feels like anger, it's just that like feeling, then they learn how to deal with that emotion. And they learn that while they're struggling, they're still lovable. Connection is still available. And usually when these kids go through it, it's really, really intense. And then we're working through it. It kind of dies down. Maybe they need some space, and then they come back, and then they want to hug. They want to come back into a connection. And that's how we learn that we're still safe, we're still loved, and this person was safe to help me through this thing where it was messy and it wasn't fun. The third reason that kids, especially little boys, express a lot of anger is when sadness isn't allowed. And this is where I am really curious about what happened for Jaime. Because he seems like a sweet boy, someone who's more emotional when he's not in his rage, right? We know he was artistic. He probably was quite sensitive. And all boys, regardless of sensitivity level, cry. All boys feel sadness. All children are going to be prone to crying more quickly than adults. And it's important for kids to know that it's okay to let their feelings out and to be sad and move through it, and then we move on. And to know that they're still loved when they're sad, that it's safe to come to the adult when they're sad, and they can get a hug, they can have someone sit with them while they cry, and help them soothe themselves through the sadness so the sadness doesn't feel scary. A lot of times kids are met when they're crying with stop crying. Why are you crying? You shouldn't be crying. This is ridiculous. Or a parent that's frustrated, maybe not intentionally trying to hurt the child, but just like, I don't know what to do. And if there's any sense that it wasn't okay to cry, it wasn't okay to be sad, whether it was just not masculine, like boys don't cry, or just a blanket statement of my mom doesn't love me when I cry, or my dad doesn't know what to do with me when I cry, and we lose connection, then boys and children will try to disconnect from their sadness. But when we push down our sadness, when sadness isn't safe to express, anger is the next thing that comes up. And we call this default anger. This is not the anger of something's happening that's not okay and I need to react to this. This is, I'm really, really sad. Sadness is not safe. So now I'm going to get angry. Because that is the safer emotion. And I have a hypothesis that Jaime experienced this to some degree. That there wasn't space for him to be sad. He felt shame and embarrassed if he was crying. And so he learned unconsciously, instead of being sad, instead of crying, I'm going to get angry. And he started doing this really young. And that in addition to that, when he was genuinely angry, that he didn't have the support that he needed. We see from his mom is doing the best that she can in episode 4, but I can see as a therapist, there's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of what we call fawning and just trying to keep the peace so that anger stays low. She doesn't know how to meet her husband in the anger. And you can imagine that with Jaime, she would have been really overwhelmed. And my hypothesis is she would have had one of two possible responses. The first is that he would have been angry and she would have been overwhelmed, and in her overwhelmed lashed out. Stop it. Right? That lash out, and then he would be frozen. This does not teach him how to be with his anger either. This just teaches him that his emotion isn't welcome and he's disconnecting from his emotion. He's also disconnecting from her. He wouldn't feel loved in that moment. And it feels like, as a child, if it feels like our feelings aren't loved, then that's something about us, that I'm not lovable. And this person isn't safe, and there's a connection rupture here. This isn't someone I can just go to that I feel warmth and loved, because there's these parts of me that she really doesn't like. Now, the other option of how his mom might have responded is that Jaime would have potentially scared her, and that when he would get really angry, she would give in to what he wanted. And for a child, this is a complicated experience because there's a part of that experience that feels really good. The child is able to, they want something, they're overpowering the adult, and then they get the thing. They're going to feel powerful, they're going to get what they want. But underneath that, there's a relational need to know that you are not afraid of me and that you're going to hold me accountable, because these emotions are so big, I don't know what to do with them, and I need help. And I need you to stay in connection with me. Don't leave me. And when a parent is like, fine, just do it, they've left the connection. So while the kid gets the thing that they're wanting, they're able to do what they want or get something, whether it's, a tangible item like new shoes or clothes, or a dessert that they wanted, or whatever that is. They're getting the thing, but they're not feeling in that love, sweet connection with the parent. And there's a rupture there, that my anger is too much for you and it's not safe here. You can't handle me. You don't really know me and you don't love all of me. So while if that was Jamie's mom's reaction, which we don't know for sure. We don't know for sure how she responded. But if it was that second one, then what that would do for Jamie is create this shame about who he is and this anger, but also and kind of put him right in that dilemma where like love isn't really available here, but I can get power. And when I go to power, I get what I want. And that's going to come up later. What he really needed was boundaries. What he needed was someone to say, you don't talk like this. You can be angry. I hear you're angry and I care about that. But this is not okay. You don't get to do this. You don't get to do this. We need to treat each other respectfully. I'm here for you. And I want to know what your anger is communicating so we can talk about that and work through this because I love you. And that would allow the child to feel supported in the hard moment. Yeah, I can share here like a personal story. So in full transparency, I don't have children, so I know there's going to be a lot of parents watching this, and some of them may be like, who are you? How do you know? You don't know what it's like. And so one, I have a lot of experience with kids and parents in my practice, but in addition to that, I was a nanny for many years during grad school, and I nannied this little boy, and he was the sweetest boy, but he had a huge temper, and he would try to push me away when he would get angry. He would throw shoes at me, he would scream at me, he would slam the door. And one of the things I was most proud of during that time was my ability to hold that boundary with him. And very clearly, you don't get to throw your shoes at me. It's okay that you're angry, but you don't throw your shoes. You can't slam the door in my face. You can ask to go to your room by yourself if you want that. And when you're ready, I'm here. I want to know why you're angry, and I want to help you through this. I'm so here for you. And there were many, many instances of this. And we got to a point where after he calmed down, we would talk about it. Then he would apologize on his own, give me a hug, say he loves me, and we would repair. And then he worked up to a capacity to just name, I'm angry right now, Becca. And I'm like, okay, thank you for telling me. What are you angry about? And we would talk through it. And this is so important because without that containment, he wouldn't have ever known how to get to that place. And he would have just kept acting out and pushing people away and potentially at some point hurting someone else in the overwhelm of the affect. So kids need help learning how to be with the anger and taking in that co-regulation to help them self-soothe and then having a safe place to talk about why they're angry. And so to summarize this, we don't know specifically how Jamie's mom responded to Jamie's anger. We do know that she felt overwhelmed by it and she didn't get him help. And so in that notion, she somehow just let it keep sliding. And most likely the hypothesis is that she just let him have what he wanted when he got angry, which led him into that space of both, when I get angry, love leaves me. I lose connection, but I get what I want and I have power. So this part of me is not lovable. I don't feel comfortable or like there's curiosity about what I'm feeling. But I do get this second place prize of the thing I wanted and I feel powerful, which is scary. There's no containment and we need love. We need that love and connection. And so that would have been lacking very early on. I'm going to re-emphasize that he probably also didn't feel safe to feel sad. And that sadness was then turning into anger, which was pushing his mom away. And then he's losing connection with his family. All right. So that is the end of that first part. Okay, the next significant piece that I'm going to go into is this core wound that both Jamie and his father share. about this time when he tried to play football. And we can see in the video of Jaime telling Brienne that he feels shame. We also see that the dad feels remorse, which I guess I didn't say this yet. The parents did love him. Right? I'm not here saying that there was no love from the parents. They didn't know how to show their love and show up in the way that Jaime really needed to feel love. And episode 4 shows the tragedy of that, how deeply they loved him and how sad this all was. So I'm going to play both the clip right now of Jaime sharing with Brienne about this incident, and then I'm going to share the clip of his dad about this incident, and then I'm going to talk about it. So let's watch these clips.
On Saturdays, and he'd cheer me on and everything, but when I'd fuck up, he'd just he'd just look away, pretend he didn't see. Maybe, or maybe he just didn't want me to see him looking sorry. I don't know. Ashamed. How did you?
Okay. Now here's the clip of his dad speaking about it.
I choked him to 40, didn't I? Because I thought it'd soften him up. But nobody was crap. So they just stuck him in goal. I just stood there on the side of the pitch while all the other dads were laughing at him. And I could feel him looking at me. And I couldn't look at him, man. I couldn't look at me homeboy.
At last, you.
Okay. So this is really important. It's interesting how it showed up twice. Showed up for both of them separately. For Jaime, there's multiple things happening here. One is that he didn't really want to play sports, and we know actually from the parents that he liked to draw, and then they encouraged him to play sports. They had good intentions with that, and we know that when kids enjoy playing sports, that the team aspect of playing sports and working together in the exercise and all of that is really good for mental health. So there's good intention. He goes to play football and he's not good. And people are laughing. And little Jaime would have been really overwhelmed and embarrassed. And naturally, a child is going to start to shame themselves in this experience. I'm not good. People are noticing. People are laughing at me. And what they need in that moment is to look to the parent and to see the parent like seeing them and smiling and with like, I see you. You're okay. I love you. And it will soothe and be like, okay, they're still seeing, the parent still sees me. I'm still loved. And there's going to be like a battle inside now. Like, do I feel ashamed? What's happening? Right? Because the kid is going to feel embarrassed. The kid is going to feel ashamed. They're not going to want to keep playing. And they're going to need the parent to be their rock in this moment to hold that this doesn't mean anything bad about them. They're just not good at this sport, and that's okay. And these people are being mean, and that's not okay. But for Jaime, he looked towards his dad, and his dad looked away from shame. His dad was so ashamed, he couldn't even make eye contact with Jaime. This would be traumatic. This would be traumatic. So now Jaime's worried and feeling shame. What do I do? And it is being reinforced by his father, that this in fact is shameful. Now, most likely they don't go on to share anything more than that moment, but most likely it was just never talked about again. And what a kid really needs is after the game for the parent to be like, hey, tough game. I could see you really trying out there, but that was hard. How was it for you? The kid might be shut down, might not want to talk about it. And, the parent can just say, like, I know that was really hard, and I'm here if you want to talk about it whenever. And hopefully the kid would know at some point, can we talk about this? I feel really sad. And there would be an opportunity to learn and to talk about how it was to not be good, and to have people laughing, and to have compassion for the pain, so that the child doesn't feel alone in their pain, that there's someone there for them to cry with. And that would have been a really painful moment. But there's the bad thing that happened, and then there's being alone in the bad thing that happened. And when we're not alone, we learn that it's okay to acknowledge this pain and move through it, and then I'm okay. But Jaime was all alone. He was all alone in that pain. There's the bad thing that happened. There's a subtle reinforcement from his dad that it is actually shameful and means something bad about him. And there's no one to be there for Jaime to actually feel the pain of how hard that was, how sad that was, or to talk him through that, what is he learning from that experience? And that, yes, they might have been laughing at him, but life's going to move on, and he's going to be okay. He's still loved. He's still a good person. He's just not good at that sport. And maybe that's not his sport, and that's okay. Or maybe we learn to practice more and become better at it, and we feel motivated, and then it creates resilience. Because look, I was really bad, and now I'm really good. Or, we know he loves to draw. Hey, that was a hard day. Let's go draw a picture about what happened, and we can process through the drawing. There's so many things that could have happened. But what Jaime needed to know is that even when life is hard and people are laughing at me, that my dad is still there, that my dad still loves me. And unfortunately, his worst fear was confirmed because his dad looked away. And that's a deep wound, that there's something really bad about me here. And it's related to this masculinity wound. If I'm not sporty, then I'm not masculine. And my dad doesn't love this part of me. My dad's ashamed of this part of me. This part of me is bad. And if anyone else sees this part of me, they're not going to like me either. Which then relates back to what happened with Brianny, right? Because he felt safe enough with Brianny to disclose this, probably for the first time. But then he quickly misinterpreted. Let me see. Oh, no. That's not true. So he discloses it, right? And then that's really vulnerable. And he's now hyper vigilant to being rejected because he's just disclosed this thing that he feels like his dad rejected in him, that he feels like is unlovable. And then it's the next beat where he asks if she can help him get out of there. And he said, because he's unhappy. And she says no, and that he's so vulnerable to that rejection because he just shared this super, super tender wound about this thing that he actually believes is unlovable and unlikable. So this wound, this incident also taught Jaime that when people are laughing at me, my dad is not the person to go to. My dad is not available for that support, because he will also be ashamed of me, which left him so, so vulnerable to what was happening at school with bullying. There was no one to go to, because if he told his dad, then his dad would also be ashamed. And that I can't emphasize enough. So, and I'm going to go into that a little bit more, but I wanted to really clarify this scene, because not the scene, but the moment with the dad and the football, because I think that had a deeply, deeply lasting impact on Jaime. and it deeply ruptured the connection with his dad, where it could have bonded them closer. He could have been like, okay, my dad's here for me even when hard things are happening, and it could have helped build resilience in Jaime. Unfortunately, Jaime felt completely alone and isolated and was having to navigate that his dad felt ashamed of him as well. All right, let's take a look at the school. The school is so chaotic. So chaotic. Watching it, my nervous system responded. I felt myself kind of being overwhelmed and dysregulated. There's not one kid that could possibly stay regulated in that kind of environment. Everyone is in a survival mode, which just adds to this situation. It's really hard to stay connected to love and curiosity about people when we're in survival, and that's for everyone, right? That is for the kids that are bullying Jaime, that is for the kids getting bullied, that is for the teachers. That school is a mess. I could do a whole video on the impact of that, because kids are not able to learn if they're that dysregulated and in survival. There's just no genuine connection happening. Everyone is just trying to not be the one being bullied. They're either just avoiding, they're doing the bullying, they're navigating so much at that school. In addition, I'm going to play this clip right here from episode 3, and we'll look at it in a moment.
You said you were bullied. The 3 of you were bullied.
People like you just love talking about bullying, don't you?
You said Tommy was called Round Pounds because his mum did her shopping at Poundland.
Yeah, but she doesn't.
And Ryan was called Dumb.
Ryan is dumb. That one was sort of true.
You said the 3 of you felt ostracised quite a
Big
lot.
words coming out now.
You said sometimes this would get physical. People would spit on you from classroom windows. You'd be tripped up and pushed.
Yeah.
You were called names and you were physically abused.
No, I was just tripped up and spat on.
Okay, so this clip, what we learned from this clip is that Jaime and his friends were bullied at school on a regular basis. So this boy does not feel very connected in his family. His vulnerability is not accepted. His vulnerability isn't loved. He doesn't feel like he can be sad or talk through his emotions. There's no trust in the relationship between him and his parents. And then he goes to school and he's being bullied on a regular basis. And there's nowhere to go with that except his friends. I think his friends were a support. It doesn't sound like they had a very intimate friendship or even healthy friendship, but they were a source of support where Jaime knew, I'm not alone. There's other people experiencing this. If he had been completely alone, he honestly, I think, would have been at a very big risk for suicide. So having those 2 friends was something that was a support and resource for Jaime, but there was no adult to go to. It didn't seem like at that school like there's any safe teacher that has the space that he would have felt seen and connected to, especially a male teacher. There's no mentors. He has no role models to look to and be like, how would they handle this? If this person that I admire, who's a healthy male role model, was getting bullied, what would they do? There's nothing. There's just this void. So as I said in the beginning of this video, if he was being bullied but felt safe to go home and talk about it with his parents or a mentor that he felt safe with, it would have had a different impact. It wouldn't have been as traumatic. It probably would have helped him build resilience, helped him stay connected to himself and not let other people define him. And when we receive love and compassion, that's how we learn to give it back out. So while someone's being bullied and that feels bad, there's another source that's giving love and compassion and space to help the child. And then they know that feels good. So not only do they have more resilience against the bullying, but they know how good it feels to feel the love and compassion, and they want to bring that back out into the world. And that's the type of person they're going to become. They're more likely to become. Jaime was not receiving love and compassion from anywhere. it seems, with the 4 hours that were given. So he's not able to really take that in to then give it back out. It's happening a little bit at home, right? His parents aren't completely abusive. There's moments of love that he is taking in, and we can see that there's sweetness in him when he's not triggered. But as a whole, there's not a lot of love and compassion coming towards him. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of silence. There's a lot of distance and neglect. And there's a lot of bullying. So there's just, he's in this vacuum. He's so isolated. He's so isolated. So from here, my hypothesis is that he finds the online content, the manosphere, toxic masculinity content. His friends have also found it. And within this culture where they're not receiving love and support and encouragement and positive bonding, and there's not a positive sense of emotional safety and care and love in the home, that their pain felt seen. And especially if they're being bullied and bullied by girls, this feeling of being rejected by the opposite sex, by girls that they like, it's being validated by an unhealthy role model. So the pain is being validated, he feels seen, and then there's all this toxic modeling of how to handle that pain. And he is unbelievably susceptible to it because he hasn't had anything positively modeled for him. If things had been different for Jaime, if Jaime had felt space to be sad and work through his feelings, if he'd felt okay to continue with his drawing and be expressive through art and be artistic, if he'd watched his dad respectfully treat his mom, which I didn't go into that too much, but I went into a little bit, but respectfully treating his mom, if when his parents were mad at him, they repaired with him and let him know he didn't deserve that. And then when he went to school, if he was bullied, he knew he could come home and get support. And he knew what love and respect feels like. Receiving love and compassion, we want to give it back out. He would have made contact with this manosphere environment and been like, what? No, that's so wrong. He would have just known it's wrong. And then in addition to have other positive male role models, right? Even if they're just on YouTube, if they're podcasters, to have people that he looks up to and respects, who he knows respects women. All of that would have been a support so that he makes contact with this material and he's like, I don't want anything to do with this. But now we have a kid who he doesn't have love and support. He doesn't know how to be with his feelings. He's had no support in that. And he doesn't know how to be with his sadness and the pain, right? So he's getting bullied. He can't make touch with the sadness and pain of that. So it's festering and festering and festering. And it's going to keep coming out in this anger. And then he, the whole thing happens with the Snapchat. In this toxic masculinity culture, he's like, maybe this is a time to ask Katie out, which isn't great, right? He's taking advantage of her vulnerability, but he's also making himself vulnerable. There's also this sense of like, well, maybe this is my shot and maybe she'll date me now. Like, maybe she'll like me now. He gets rejected by her and then he gets bullied online. And I want to speak to specifically the incel bullying because I don't think this has gotten enough attention. So the incel bullying, Jaime is not just being told that he's ugly. And Jaime even wasn't self-identifying as an incel. I know there's people talking about the show as if he's identifying with incel culture. He was told in a comment on Instagram that he is an incel through the emojis, and then people liked it. Now, why is that significant? Most people in incel culture are young men, or men of any age, that are genuinely, involuntarily celibate. Jaime's 13. Obviously, most 13-year-olds are celibate. So this isn't saying this you're involuntarily celibate right now. My way that I interpret this is them saying you are an incel, meaning you're always going to be an incel. You are always going to be involuntarily celibate. No one is ever going to want you or like you or love you. That is devastating. We cannot undermine how devastating that would be to a 13-year-old. And this 13-year-old already feels rejected by his parents or misunderstood by his parents. Like there's something unlovable about him, that he can't be real. His vulnerability is not loved there. His dad feels shame around, he can't come to his dad with his weaknesses. And then he's going to school and he's bullied. He's not liked by most people. And the thing that gets kids through this is the future. It's the hope. It's that one day this is gonna get better. These people will leave. I'll meet new people. They'll like me. They'll love me. I'll meet a girl and we're gonna fall in love. There's a hope. And this comment is in the bullying saying this is who you are. This is forever. And then it gets a bunch of likes. So it's not just her, it's a bunch of likes and it's public. With a kid that doesn't know how to manage his emotions because he hasn't had support, he doesn't feel lovable. And really, this here would be a moment that a kid would become suicidal. And there's like an option. A lot of kids would be in a dilemma of to take their own life. And I think I'm not saying that the murder was okay. It absolutely was not okay, but we have to look at all the weight that would be happening at this moment without any support. Not one trusted adult to go to with this pain and humiliation to try and figure it out. Except his friends. He did have his friends. Again, I think they were a resource. And this is where I'm unclear based on the first episode. I have rewatched this episode, how terrified he is, how he keeps saying he didn't do it. There's so many reasons he could be doing that, but I'm very curious if the friend who gave him the knife, if it was his idea, if he saw it online, and if Jaime was encouraged and egged on to do this, and then Jaime felt like he had to do it to prove his masculinity to his friends. Again, not excusable, and we don't even know if this is true. But if it is true, we have a whole nother dynamic here, because these friends were the only people Jaime had on his side, and it probably felt like the only people in the universe that would ever be on his side. So he's now in a dilemma to do this horrible thing to a girl and kill her, or to what would feel like he would die. There'd be no love in the universe available to him, no connection available. And that would feel actually life-threatening to a 13-year-old. And that amount of peer pressure, and 13-year-olds are known to be more vulnerable to peer pressure anyways. So there's no evidence. The 4 episodes did not give enough. We don't know what led to the decision. We know he was hanging out with his friends right before. We don't know if it came from Jaime. We don't know if it came from one of them. All we know is that the knife came from his friends, so they definitely knew about it. And my hypothesis is that the idea was not Jaime's. That the idea came from someone else, and he felt peer pressured and like he would just be completely alone in the world if he didn't do it. I'm really, really curious to see in season 2 if that gets a little bit more if that gets more attention, if we learn more about that. But regardless, even if it was his idea, we have a kid that was so vulnerable. Now, of course, there is agency. Of course, he could have decided not to do it anyways. But that would take a certain amount of strength in a soul and a child And Jaime just didn't have that. And we can see how much pain, how much rejection, how much heartbreak he's been through. I also want to name, when it comes back to the parents, I cannot underestimate this enough. So sometimes people are like, oh yeah, the parents, teens don't like their parents ever, blah, blah, blah. The wounding with our parents is our first ever heartbreak. We are born as babies into this world deeply loving them, deeply, and 100% expecting to be deeply loved back. And when we receive less than that, it's not just like, oh, that sucks. It hurts. It is deep heartbreak, deep heartbreak. And we don't know exactly what happened with his mom, except that there was a lot of misattunement and not enough support for those emotions, which would have felt heartbreaking, which would have felt like my mom can't love me in these moments, and I feel like I'm bad for this. And then with his dad, we know that at that football moment, that was a deep heartbreak. My dad doesn't love me right now. My dad doesn't love this part of me. And then all the bullying, all the rejection. And we are biologically wired for rejection to feel painful because historically we needed to survive in groups and clans. And so it was a motivator to conform, to survive. So it is painful. And it created all these different dilemmas. And then all he had was his rage and his power. Not excusing it again, but we can understand how he got into that situation and then made a bad choice that took someone's life away and ruined his life as well. So my hope here is that in this compassion, we can say, okay, this wasn't just a bad kid. This was a kid with a lot of pain, without a lot of support. And now we can look at, how do we support kids? How do we support boys to not end up like this? To have more resilience, to have more internal right versus wrong, and not be succumbed to impulses or peer pressure or whatever it is at that very last part that led him to make that act. How do we support kids to not be vulnerable to the manosphere, to want to treat women respectfully and be loving and be open, to be capable of giving love and open to receiving love and not needing to resort to power out of fear of rejection? So I'm going to go through a list of things that can be helpful in case you're a parent watching this and want to know, what is it that boys need that can be protective. So here we go. And I'm going to be reading this. Okay. So I am going to be reading this. So, what helps boys feel loved and connected and not be as vulnerable to that manosphere influence is lots of love and connection in the home. Lots of love and connection. Boys need love and connection just as much as girls do. They need hugs. They need sweetness. They need the parents to be delighted around them. They need play. They need all of that. And they need safety in being sad when they're young. They need nurturance around sad. They need help communicating their feelings. What needs to be said? Do they need a hug? Do they need some cuddles? They need to know that their sadness, they are still lovable when they're sad. And then they learn how to soothe their sadness through being soothed. And they also learn that the sadness is temporary and it's okay to feel it, and then we're going to move on. When they're angry, they need a combination of boundaries. They need to know it's okay to feel angry, but it's not okay to hurt people when we're angry. And they need the adult to stay calm as it's happening, but firm, calm but firm, right? We're not allowing this, but I'm right here with you. I'm right here with you. Do you want me here? Do you want me in the next room? And then that we're open to conversation. I want to hear why you're angry. Let's talk through it. Your anger is telling you something's wrong. What does it feel like is wrong? Let's talk through the anger so you can learn how to communicate your anger and be with your anger. As we're doing that, we're teaching kids on like a unconscious level through the right hemisphere of the brain. They're learning to regulate by us being calm and regulated around them. They're learning that when I get angry, I have tools internally to soothe myself, but they're not born with those tools. They need us there to help them soothe. That's how they learn. to soothe themselves when they're angry. And then modeling repair is a huge one. So as adults, we're going to get angry with kids from our own stuff. But if we treat a child in a way that they didn't deserve, if our anger came out at them in a way that they didn't deserve, for us to say, I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve that. I shouldn't have yelled at you in that moment. I shouldn't have X, Y, and Z. I'm learning and I'm trying to do better. But what I really want you to know is you did not deserve that. That's a big one. It's teaching that no, we're not just helping them in their anger, but we're letting them see that we know also that it's not okay. And when it happens, that we say we're sorry and we genuinely repair and are there for them to share their emotional experiences of how that was. Because you say, how was that for you? And they might say it was scary. I hear that. I hear that it was scary. I'm so sorry that it was scary. I'm here now. This helps safety in the relationship, and this is something that's going to help them also feel comfortable to go to you when either they mess up or they're being hurt, that my mom really cares or my dad really cares about my feelings. They care how I am, and they're going to be there for me. If you witness your child being bullied or laughed at, to stay really present in your love for them and sending out that love as it's happening, and then naming it later and talking about it and how are they processing it and what does it mean, to let them know you are holding for them. This means nothing about them. They care so much about your opinion of them. And so when they know that you don't feel ashamed of them, you know that didn't mean anything about them, and you're going to hold that for them, it's going to help their resiliency in those moments and their ability to give themselves love and stay connected to themselves when they are being mistreated by others. They're going to be able to hold on to your love and know that they're okay. Let's see. Consent. Talking about consent to body autonomy at an early age with boys. This can be as young as 3 or 4, talking about consent to hugs, consent to wrestling, asking people, do you want a hug? Asking them, do they want a hug? They get to say yes or no, and teaching the importance of that boundary. This really helps them that as they become sexual, consent is a really easy topic because it's been here the whole time. They've never been forced to hug. They've never been forced to be in physical contact with anyone. And they know that they are expected to ask for consent from others as well for that physical contact. And then helping your child find positive male role models outside of the family is really important. So whether this is a sports coach, a male babysitter, a camp counselor, it can be podcasters, it can be people on YouTube. There's a vast range of who it can be, but helping them find those and healthy, positive role models that they really like, that are funny, that have interesting stories, that there's values and energy that they're looking up to, and then engaging in conversation about it. What is it that you like about so-and-so podcast, or what are their values that you feel like are your values too? What is it, and then you can say, what is it you don't like about them? Or is there anything that they value that you don't value? Help them get curious, about their own values, and being able to witness these positive values in other men is really important. And then if there's any one of these men that can also be somewhat of a mentor outside of the family, it can be really helpful for boys and girls, but definitely boys to have outside support of the family in case there's stuff going on they don't feel comfortable to go to parents. There's some other positive adult, safe adult to go to with their struggles, so they're not stuck in their head trying to figure things out, going to their friends for advice or going online to advice where there's going to be negative influences. And for fathers to model loving behavior to their mother and other women around. If this is a gay couple, then fathers modeling positive and respectful behavior to any women in their life. That is demonstrating to the boys from a very young age that women are important, women are human, women are deserving of love and respect. And they take that in. They want to be like their dad. They look up to their dad. That's going to positively impact how they're going to treat their peers. Talking about friendships with your kids when they're young will help them make better friends when they are teens. And friends have a huge influence in adolescence. So when they're young, having like conversations through, this can be through books and lots of different ways, but what makes a good friend? How are they being a good friend? And then what does a good friend look like to them? So how are they being treated by their friends? And are they being treated well and being able to notice what is good and not good? Part of this too is helping kids when they're younger connect to their values so that they stay connected to that through adolescence, and they see when the kids are not showing the same values, they're not tempted to be friends with those kids. Friendships in teens can make so much of a difference between the decisions that they make, whether they're dangerous to themselves or dangerous to others. And then talking about sex and sexual feelings as puberty is coming along, there are age-appropriate ways to talk about this, and we want to be talking about it because whether or not we're talking about it, they're feeling it, they're thinking about it, and they're going to be curious about it. So as they're coming of age at puberty, talking about sexual desire, appropriate ways to talk to girls, and really like the vulnerability, naming the vulnerability of crushes and connection with girls and falling in love and eventually sex. That it's not something, it's something that's vulnerable for both people, and taking that into account. However you want to have that conversation, and then consent being a really big piece here too. And we can talk about insecurities. For boys, it would be most comfortable for them to have this conversation with their dad about what are they nervous about, and having somewhere to talk through that, and being able to talk through the fear of being rejected, because they're gonna be rejected. Most people have been rejected by a crush or by someone that they really liked. And so even preparing for that so that they have more confidence, and when it happens, it's not as big of an impact. And then limiting screen time and setting boundaries, and especially having boundaries for bedtime to make sure that these kids are getting enough sleep. That was one thing that also came up with Jaime, is that he would be in his room by himself on his computer until 1 or 2 a.m. And he wasn't getting enough sleep. And we don't know what he was being exposed to online. So those are some of the things that can really help boys feel loved and supported throughout childhood, so that they're not as vulnerable as Jaime was to the online influence. Because the reality in 2025 is that kids are going to come into contact with this. So the question isn't just how to prevent the contact, but how do we build enough resilience and connection to what's right and wrong inside of them, so that they're not vulnerable to, they don't agree with it when they find it. That we want them to look at it and say, this is super weird. I can't believe anyone does this. And the way we get them there is by having a life where they feel loved and they know what it's like to be loved and respected. They see people in their life loving and respecting others. They feel safe to feel their feelings. They know when they're in pain that they can go and get support. And they have positive male role models who treat girls and women well. All right, that's it for today. If you are interested to learn more about complex trauma, I do have some offerings below. I have a free resource that teaches about complex trauma. I also have a 1-hour mini course that goes into more details about how this attachment relational wounding can impact us into adulthood. And stay tuned for more videos. All right, bye guys.